So thanks again, though, Brandon, for having me. Cole, GPEVCO, I appreciate that. I know there's a number of GPEVCO people here. We have MSF students here as well. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you about this. It might sound like it's a little early, right? Learning about selling your business, because I'm guessing maybe you don't have a business, or maybe it's a pressure washing business. But there's going to be some important points that I'm going to talk about. I'm also excited about being here because I'm a Gator. As you saw in the bio video, I'm a doctoral student at the UF, and even though my heart is maize and blue, I did my engineering degree at Michigan a long time ago, I've got a Gator in my heart too. The minute I stepped on campus, the minute I went to the first game, I became part of the Gator Nation. So thanks for having me, and it's really exciting for me to be part of the university, to be able to participate in the doctoral program in business, while also I'm starting up, as Brandon mentioned, an M&A firm. We're a small firm. We've got clients, but we're mostly using, I've got a number of interns. I think I've had 6 or 7 interns, marketing interns, business interns, and finance interns, MSF students, that have come over and helped me build the infrastructure, build the basis for doing M&A for small businesses. My world I started out at GM and TI, but my world has been small businesses for the last number of years, and this is an M&A firm primarily for small businesses. When I say small businesses, I really mean micro businesses. A lot of you think these days when you hear in class small businesses under 100 million, we're really in the 50 million to maybe down to 5 million. Those are our areas. So that's a little bit about me, and thanks for coming. I think this is going to be important for you, even if you have the clicker, great. Because building a sellable business is really what it's all about. A large number of you, we know statistically, are going to probably be business owners, or at least a pretty good percentage of you. And so this talk today will be important when you start the business, and then as you go through life and you get ready to sell the business. If you don't own a business, it's inevitable that you're going to have clients, or maybe friends, or you already have family members. Anybody have family members here that own a business? Right. Great. So super important. Take notes today, mental notes, what have you. They probably don't know a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about. So this, again, could be valuable for you. And I'm going to show you and talk about my proprietary conceptual model, my system, which I call the AIM and ACT system. And this system is good for selling businesses, but it also would apply to selling real estate, or selling a car, or even selling a crappy couch. You don't believe me, but we're going to talk about that. A little bit funny, but first of all, let's talk about how we learn. Why is it that for some of the most important things that we do in life, there's no training, there's no course, and really no experience or no way of learning how to do it? You know, when we think about going into something, many times that's very important, it's a big challenge in our life, like relationships, having children, we just do it. We just jump in, and we learn by trial and error. Isn't that right? And when you get to the point where you're ready to sell a business, it will literally be the biggest sale of your life, okay? It'll be one of those big challenges of life. And even though the sale of a business, when a business owner goes to sell a business, even though this is going to have a tremendous impact on their life and their future and the future of their business, they really have no experience. You know, business owners spend a lifetime learning about business. You guys are starting it right now, right? You're learning about what it takes to start a business, what it takes to grow a business. Business owners through their career are learning how to maximize revenue and optimize profit. Okay? And yet they haven't learned anything really about the most important stage, this sell of their business, this final stage. And as I said, it'll affect not only their future, but it also will affect their company's future. You'd be surprised to know that about 50% of businesses that are sold, small businesses that are sold, within 5 years, they're out of business or greatly reduced in size. They've lost employees, they've lost revenue, their suppliers now don't have a good customer. So this has a huge potential impact on the economy. So it has a real effect. And when you're a business owner, you only get one chance to do it right. Not only do most people only ever own one business and they dedicate their life to it, but once it's sold, it's gone. So it's a really critical thing, right? Selling your business, learning how to do it right. And as I said from the beginning, most people haven't been taught anything about it. So that's why I'm on a mission to help sell a company, teach people how to sell companies successfully. I want you to learn a little bit from my successes, but more importantly, from my mistakes. And I've made a few. You're going to hear about that. I'll take you through the AIM and ACT 6-step process with a couple of examples. So by the end of this, you'll go, yeah, AIM, ACT, I can use it for different things. Then I'll stop for Q&A, because I know you'll all have questions, but I'll ask you to hold them mostly for the Q&A session. And then we'll have a take-home message, and anybody that wants to stay after that for a meet and greet, you want to ask me questions about what you should write on your application if you wanted to get to UF Business School or the Harvard Business School, or you want to talk to me about M&A in general, I'm glad to sit down and talk with all of you a little bit, okay? Great. So let me tell you about the first company I ever owned. It was a company called Doyen. Weird name, right? My assistant picked it out, and I said, what does it mean? And she said, well, in France, it means, it's a French word, it means top of a given class or profession. I thought, well, that sounds good, but we don't sell anything in France. And she said, well, in Japan, do and yen would be like yes and money. And I thought, well, we don't sell machines in Japan either. Forget that. I said, what am I going to tell people, our customers in the U.S.? She said, well, just tell them it's that sound that a spring makes when you bend it back and let it go. Doing. I'm like, great. But anyhow, we liked the name. We stuck with it. I formed the company in 1993 together with a partner. Interestingly, he was my former boss, and he was 17 years my senior. His name was Alan. And anybody have any idea what a company, Doyen, you see the picture up, any idea what we made? It wasn't medical products. We made machines that packaged these kinds of products. Not super sexy, not like a Snapchat or a Facebook, but 12 years later, we've grown faster and made more profits than Snapchat and Facebook had made in their first 12 years. And we were doing 10 million in sales at that time. 10 million in sales with 100 people, over 100 people actually, in the US, the UK, and Malaysia. It was a real success story. But by that time, Alan was 60 years old. And he was he wanted to slow down, work less, have less stress, spend more time with his family, maybe travel, and most importantly, sort of the goal of all business sales, have real money in the bank. All the things that people want to do when they're ready to retire. So we hired a broker, and within 4 months, we got our first offer. It was a 7-figure upfront payment with another 7-figure earnout. Does everybody here know what an earnout is? Anybody? Contingent payment, okay? So you can be paid over time, it's guaranteed. Or you might have to have money held in escrow, and then at the end of an escrow period, that would be paid to you as long as you don't breach warrants and reps and warrants. But an earnout is a contingent payment. So that means if you hit this revenue, you're going to get this much of the earnout. Or if you hit these profits, or it could be tied to the balance sheet. So we had a 7-figure upfront payment and then a 7-figure earnout that we could earn. So it looked great to us. So we jumped on it, we signed the deal, and the deal closed. Now, Alan got a big check in the mail. He started working part-time, and he was happy. And I got a big check in the mail. I stayed on to run the company. I was happy, and I was looking forward to growing the company even more growth. 3 weeks later, the new owners started to make changes. They changed my title, they changed my responsibility, and they changed my authority. They also made a change to the accounting system, and I didn't realize it then, but that change to the accounting system would affect how the company recognized profits, which would affect that second 7-figure earnout we were counting on. Does anyone have any ideas about how they could make an accounting change that could affect how the company recognized profits? Go back to your accounting. Accruals. We hadn't accrued for warranty. We never had any returns of our products. But accounting GAAP methods say you got to take a percentage of your sales and accrue for warranties because you might have a return, or bad debt. We never had any bad debt. Our customers paid us. We made sure we got, but they wanted accruals for bad debt. And they went on down the list, making other accounting changes that it would affect that 7-figure earnout for us. Not great. How does that happen? Somebody asked me when I gave this talk a couple of days ago, didn't you have lawyers? Yeah, we had lawyers. We had lawyers. And we had a good contract. But contracts are sometimes subject to interpretation. They interpreted it one way, and we interpreted it another way. That means there was a loophole in the contract. Now, I've been in business for years. I've had a lot of employees. And I always like to tell my employees, don't worry too much if you make a mistake. Mistakes are inevitable, right? Just recognize it. Of course, always admit it. Learn from it. And then try to find a way to make sure that it's never going to happen again. But that loophole in the contract was Alan and my mistake. And it was a 7-figure mistake. 6 months later, I was forced out of the company I founded. I was fired. Never been fired before. Super painful. And that success, Doyen, that we were so proud of, all of a sudden felt like a big failure. Okay? And Alan and I, who'd been friends, he was my boss, we were friends, and perfect partners for 12 years, we never spoke again. The tragedy of our mistake, of our loss, was too much. I want to go back just one point on this too. And when we first found out about this loophole in the contract, we did decide to sue. Okay? I don't know if any of you have heard about lawsuits, because that's the thing that we all say in America. Hey, let's sue. This is a good idea. Let's go ahead and sue. We wanted to get back that money they owed us, right? Well, 2 years later, and after $300,000 in legal fees, we were finally ready to sue. And then my lawyer called us up, and he wanted to warn us that the trial alone could cost another $100,000. Anybody imagine that it could cost that much? Yeah, another $100,000. And then he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, Ray, the day we walk up the steps of the courthouse, I'm going to want you to look up at the top of that building, and I want you to replace the word courthouse with casino, because you're going to have a 50-50 chance. Okay? Scary. So rather than gamble another $100,000, Alan and I had only one sane decision that we could make, and that was to walk away from the lawsuit. They had our company, and we weren't going to get a penny more. So you see the tragedy of not doing it right, how bad this can be. As I said, Alan and I never spoke again. We just sort of drifted apart and, just didn't want to talk about it. They had our company. So have any of you had major failures in your life? I think we all have, right? Anybody like it? None of us like it. But when you're at the bottom, there's really only one direction you can go. That's up. So, I learned a lot from that. And I made it really, really commitment to make sure that I would get some lessons, some takeaways. I learned how to sell a business the right way, how to select the right broker, how to select the right attorney, how to find the right buyer, somebody that you could trust, and how to structure the terms of the sale so those things wouldn't happen again. And I learned that failure can be good as long as you can learn from it, as long as you can take away some important lessons. I committed then to never making those same mistakes again. And I've had a lot of successes in selling business since Doyen, but I've also made more mistakes and learned more lessons. Doyen wasn't the first and only mistake I ever made. So this is sort of a message to all of you that you're going to make mistakes. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how educated, or how well you think you're going to do it. Be open to it. You're going to learn from your mistakes and try to avoid them, of course, but when you make them, you're going to want to try to recognize them and learn from them. And as a result of this Doyen experience, I'm on this mission now to help other business owners. Although I have an M&A firm and we're helping companies that are 10 to 50 million in sales, I realize that there's hundreds and hundreds of businesses out there in the world that are 5 million, 1 million, 200,000 in revenue, real businesses, right? Mom and pops. And I'm on a mission to educate them, part of this presentation I'm going to be giving across the country to business owners. We're also, with my intern team, some of whom are here tonight, we're developing a website and a webinar that you guys will be invited to test out in the next few weeks. And then I'm also developing a course so people can learn about how to use the AIM and ACT system on this mission that I have to teach people how to learn from my mistakes, but more importantly, how to avoid, the stress, the disappointment that I had, leaving money on the table, and all the other common mistakes that people make in a business sale. Because I've done there, I've been there, I've done that. Okay? The system that I've developed is called AIM and ACT. We're going to go through this a couple of times. It starts out with assess, and again, this is a conceptual model that can apply to real estate, it can apply to other things. That's the sign of a good conceptual model. You maybe never have heard this before, but when you're out there giving an idea to someone, ideas are great and people will listen to ideas. But if you develop a model or a system, people will pay for that. They'll buy it, they'll learn it, and they'll like it. So that's why instead of just giving people ideas, I developed a model. Assess has to do with looking at a business first. What condition is it in? Is it valuable? What is the value of the company? Most owners don't have a realistic sense of that. Who's going to be affected by the sale? Are there partners, family members, or customers? Could they be affected by the sale? And really assessing when the company should be sold, how it should be sold to a family member, should it be transferred to the employees, should it be sold to a big company, a small company, to a competitor? And then when's the right time? So assessing, like many things in life, is the first and most important step. The next step, as we go up this sort of mountain of AIM and ACT, is improve. Now, we don't always have the chance in a business that needs to be sold tomorrow. We don't have enough time frame to make big improvements. But for almost every business, there's something you can do to make it better. And if you have 6, 12, or 24 months, certainly there's things you can do to make it better. It's like a house. Have you ever heard of someone saying, hey, I've got a house, but I've got to clean up the clutter, I've got to put up a new coat of paint, I've got to make a few repairs, then I'll be ready to sell? Well, the same thing with a business. When I go into businesses, I see that they often have little things and bigger things that they can do to improve. They can make smart investments that have low risk and return. You can't just go into a business and say, hey, we're going to double sales, because they've already been trying that for years. But there are many things that you can do, and we'll show you in some examples. Then the next step is market. And that's not just marketing, but that's identifying your market. You've got to be realistic about who you would sell the company to, who a potential buyer would be, what the buyer would be looking for. And then after that, you've got to go out and decide if you want to use a broker, and if you need help in identifying these buyers or doing that, find somebody like me, an M&A professional. And then after that, create really, really strong documents. It's a lot of what the MSF students do for me when they come to work for me, is help create executive summaries, confidential information memorandums. Cole just did one for me yesterday, 21 pages, and did it again, and then did it again, so forth. But having really high quality documents, because when we say this, that first impressions are lasting, it's not just an old wives' tale, it's not just an old adage. It's actually been cognitively proven that the first impression that we have from someone, from a person, and from a company is the most lasting impression. So you've got to make great first impressions as you go out in the market. And then you can decide whether or not you're going to do a broad search, a narrow search, contact a few companies, or contact, as I did on my last project, 489 companies. And we got 20 people that signed the non-disclosure agreement. They were willing to look at the documents. 10 visited, and we got 5 offers. What happens when you get 5 offers? You get a bidding war going on. So it's pretty exciting, and the price goes up. Okay, so that's ACT, assess, improve, market. Then you've got to go to an agreement. A lot of people just think, well, you just have a contract, right? Well, I've been in deals where you have 3 or 4 contracts: indication of interest, letter of intent, binding letter of intent, purchase agreement, closing conditions. So one agreement doesn't cover it sometimes, and it requires more than just that. And in each step of that agreement, something can go wrong, and the deal can fall apart. Okay, I'm going to show you how to use this in a minute. Lastly, you've got to close, and many times deals fall apart right before the close. There's some critical issues in close. You need to create a data room so people can do due diligence. How many people know what due diligence is? Okay, a few of you. So let me just repeat it for those of you that don't. Due diligence is a strange word, first of all, because you do due diligence. We went to the company to do due diligence. But due diligence means that you're going to have access, as the buyer, to every single document that the seller owns. Their patents, their lawsuits, their contracts, their financials, everything. Because we've signed the agreements now. Now we want to make sure that everything you told us is 100% true, and we don't find any warts, we don't find any things hidden in the due diligence process. So this used to be, in the old days, they'd have a data room, and papers would just be laid out on tables, 20 years of files. But now it's done electronically with something called a virtual data room that we use, and the documents are uploaded, and people can review them and ask questions. And sometimes what happens in the due diligence process is the buyer finds something that's wrong, and they want to make changes. They want to renegotiate the price. Even though we might have signed 3 or 4 agreements, now the price is going to change. The buyer is got concerns. Who has all the power at the point of due diligence? Buyer or the seller? The buyer does, right? Because they've got the money. The seller's probably already told his friends and family, we're selling. We got a contract. They've already looked at boats. But yet, the deals can change because of what happens at closing. The deals can fall through. And I mentioned briefly that it's important to think about the transition, which is the last step. This is after the deal closed. But the deals are never over when they close, because often owners are asked to stay on. This is, again, in smaller private companies, owners are asked to stay on. They may have an earn-out, like I did with Doyen, and they may have an employment agreement that says you have to stay for 2 more years and teach us everything that you know. They may have a consulting agreement. You're allowed to go home, but anytime we need you on the phone or we need you to travel to go see a customer, you've got to be there. Non-compete. And you can't go work for a competitor or start another company to compete with us. So there's a lot of transition things that go on. And in fact, it's really important for the sake of that business to have a successful handoff. Okay? So now I told you a little bit about the AIM and ACT system, and I told you that it applies to selling a business, maybe selling real estate. It's a test, again, of a good conceptual model. What about selling an old crappy couch? Does anybody here have an old crappy couch that looks like this one? Nobody has an old crappy couch? You guys all have nice couches? Well, that's my couch, my old crappy couch, not my current crappy couch, right? Let's see if the AIM and ACT system, just like humor me, if you will, and help me out a little bit if you can, if we can use the AIM and ACT system to apply to this old crappy couch. Can you get the next slide? Oh yeah, that's it. So let's assess it. We've got an old crappy couch. Now we could just put it on the curb and have somebody take it away and we'd be done with it. But wouldn't it be great to get a little cash out of it? You're graduating soon. You want to get rid of your couch. You paid $100 for it. And so now we assess the couch. Does it have any value? Who owns the couch? Was it a partnership that you and your roommate went in on it? When is the right time to sell the couch, right? Because are you all graduating and leaving town at the same time? You don't want to sell the couch before your roommates are gone. So these are some of the same things that you would do in a business. You assess it. You decide, is there anything like hidden down the cracks of the couch, right? Next step, improve. A buyer's going to start running the other way if those stains that you've accrued on your old crappy couch, you don't take care of them, right? You got to either flip the cushions over or maybe make an investment in Febreze or upholstery cleaner to try to, improve the value of the couch, literally. Next, you're going to go to market the couch. I'm pretty sure nobody's going to buy that couch who's a professor here or a resident of Gainesville. That's a student couch right there. And from the looks of you guys, it's not even as good enough for a student. So you've got to assess your market. I'm not going to put it in the Sun Sentinel. I'm going to either put it on Craigslist or Facebook, and I'm going to market the company or the couch appropriately. Next, I'm going to agree. Somebody calls me up from Craigslist, and is he going to pick it up? Do I have to carry it down the couch? Do I have to drive it to his house? So there's various levels of agreement and terms that you might not think about, but you have to go through that process. Then you're going to close. Now, how many people would accept a check from someone on Craigslist? How many people would accept a bag of pennies? Like, I got all these pennies, man. I'd like to trade it in for a couch. No, right? You're probably not going to let your beloved crappy couch go until you've got cold hard cash in your hand, right? And now transition. Your couch is gone. You're ready to move out. You're ready to move on. But what about that stain that the couch conveniently had covered up? You want to get your deposit back from your rent, from your landlord. So you've got to think about how you're going to do that. And then maybe think about that next couch in your life. that couch that's going to suit your next stage of your life and your lifestyle. Maybe a $200 couch this time instead of a $100 couch. So you see the aim and act system is a conceptual model. It can be used in other areas. Let's talk about a real practical example, okay? Here's a company. This is a recent example, by the way. Company was sold in 2016. The guy on the left, 300 pounds, toys with 350 on the bench press, former linebacker for Auburn, friend of mine, Wyatt Geist. That translates loosely into white ghost in German, but Wyatt Geist. He was a top spine implant instrument salesman. And he had spent years in the OR watching doctors struggle and even sometimes make mistakes in spine surgery, right? And he had an idea about instruments that could save time and be safer for physicians to do surgery. And he developed these products, and they were patented and FDA approved. And he started SafeWire. His goal was to build the company up to $10 million and then sell it off, okay? And the products were proven to be successful. They did everything they were promised, but they were very, very expensive. And by 2014, he had grown the revenue to about $2.2 million in sales, but with a $1.1 million loss. And the company was out of money. Now, here's another question for you. They were already twice the price of their competitor's product, because it was premium, but twice the price, sometimes 3 times the price. They couldn't raise the price, all right? They had a single supplier. This is a special instrument that required special manufacturing. It required FDA documentation. So they couldn't go buy another supplier because the supplier they have took them a year to qualify. So they can't raise the price. They can't lower the cost. They're losing $1.1 million. So Wyatt invited me to come in. I knew Wyatt because I was an investor in the company. I invested in 2010. And he asked me to come in and try to use the aim and act system to help him sell the company, all right? So first we assessed the company. We looked at what the goals were, met with the board of directors. We wanted to grow revenue. We needed to grow profit, but we were out of money, so we determined that funding was the top priority, okay? We were able to quickly find a venture capital company that was willing to invest $1.4 million on reasonable terms, okay? With that investment, we decided we need to improve the company, raise sales, and raise profits. But I told you, couldn't raise the price, and we couldn't lower our manufacturing costs. Anybody have any ideas on what we could do to try to build revenue, build profit? Cole? That's exactly right, exactly right. I fired the entire sales and marketing team, except for Wyatt. Anybody want to take a guess what happened to sales and revenue after I fired the entire sales and marketing team? Probably you could say sales went down, but profits went up, right? Because we had less employees, but our sales went down, so maybe our profits went up. Or maybe sales went down and profits went down because we had no one selling enough to cover our overheads. Well, what happened was sales went up and profit went up. There was already enough momentum in the market for the company to continue its sales with just Wyatt talking to existing hospitals, people that liked the product, and without the big overhead and without the employee cost, we were able to raise profits. So in 2014, we were doing $2.1 million in sales and $1.1 million loss. By 2015, I'd helped the company get to $3.2 million with $600,000 in profit, almost a 20% EBIT. Like most of you guys in GPEVCO, you know what that means. Or MSA, that's a pretty good, profit. At that point, we knew with that level of sales and with that level of profit that we could market this company to large spine implant companies that might like to have some really novel and interesting instruments. Now, these are billion-dollar companies. These are not small companies at all. But those instruments, if every one of their surgeries was quicker and safer with their implants, that would make doctors buy their implants more. So it was really attractive. So we went around, we talked to 2 companies. We got letters of intent from 2 companies, 2 giant companies. And after multiple rounds of letters of intent, indication of interest, we then finally got to a purchase agreement with one of them. Okay? But as luck would have it, we couldn't really get to the close because there was a quality problem with our one manufacturer that delayed the closing by more than 6 months. I think it was actually 8 months. Now the deal could have blown up. They could have just walked away. But fortunately, different from Doyen, we had a contract that allowed for delays. We had considered this possibility that there could be some delays in producing the product for this manufacturer. So we were able to go and close 6 months late, and we ended up getting a $10 million exit value. Wasn't all up front. We got an upfront payment, and then we got 5% of royalties for the next 7 years. So me and the other investors are all going to get royalty checks for the next 7 years. Well, we're pretty happy about that. 10 million valuation, if you remember, that was Wyatt's goal. And Wyatt, because I was giving him advice and telling him about the AIM and ACT system, he had already planned his transition. He had to stay on as a consultant, but he was also able to start a new company. And the day that the deal closed and we got the final checks, he was already ready to launch his next company. He was only 42 years old. He wasn't ready to retire. So it's a good story and a good example how you can use AIM and ACT to, it's the system, to process to achieve a successful business exit. Again, they aimed on their targets and they acted on their highest priorities, and they were able to have this successful exit. So maybe a better example than the couch example, right? $10 million. So let me stop right there. Now I've told you a little bit about Doyen, which still was a little bit of a success, but a sad story. And I've told you a little bit about SafeWire. Let me stop for questions here. Do anybody have questions about business sales, the AIM and ACT system? Yes?
What's your business model? How are you charging fees?
So that's a really great question. So for my business, for my market, I typically charge, I'd like to charge a reverse Lehman, but for some customers, I just charge a straight percentage. And it can be, depending on the customer, it could be 6%, it could be 8%, it could be 10%. I assess my company, my customers, my clients, before I even suggest getting into an engagement agreement, and I determine how difficult it's going to be. I've got a client right now that is based in Mexico, new client that we just have. Cole's going to be working his fingers to the bone on this one. Deloitte had the company for over a year on the market trying to sell it. They get one offer. And so these guys have come to me. I've told them about the AIM and ACT system. It's going to be a challenge. First of all the financial statements look funny because they're Mexican format. They're in Spanish, and we've got to convert them to U.S. We're going to be targeting U.S. customers. So, but anyhow, that's just an example of how I would adjust my fees for certain bigger challenges. But has anybody ever heard of a reverse Lehman? So typically in M&A, people will use a Lehman or a reverse Lehman. A reverse Lehman means, and there's a double reverse Lehman, but a reverse Lehman would mean you'd get 6% on the first million of value of the sale. And then you get 5% on the next million. So if it's a 2 million sale, you just get 6 and 5. But if, say, it's a 6 million, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is your percentage. Or a lot of times it bottoms out at 2. And a double reverse Lehman would be 6 on the first million, 6% on the second million, then 5% on the third, 5% on the fourth, and so forth. So there's different ways to do it. And as you go up the value chain, if I'm doing a $20 million deal, I'm not going to be able to say, hey, I want 6% or I want 8%. I'm going to have to do some Lehman type formula. Okay? Then you have to think about who's motivated. Am I motivated to just get a deal done because I'm happy with the 654 and I don't really care if I get the 3-2? It's sort of, you have to decide, what's in the best interest of your client and what's the best interest of you when you do it. Does that answer your question? Probably more than you wanted to know. Yeah. So you asked about the model too, and the model is find clients, get agreements, market them using the AIM and ACT system, try to improve them, market them, help them all the way through through all the stages to get to a close and to get to a transition. And this is a great business, by the way. I mean, M&A, working on Wall Street, I did work on Wall Street for a short time between my first year and second year of business school. I worked there as an intern, and it was super exciting and super intense, and I really enjoyed it. But I decided I was more of a small business guy, and I ran small businesses for many years. I was looking for doing a lot of startups, and I was involved in those. But, and there is quite a bit of a difference from doing small cap business M&A from doing large business. When you're doing large business M&A, there's a lot of pitch books and they're giant deals. $1 billion deal is a small deal these days. So not a small deal, but it's not a big deal. So any other questions? Yeah.
When developing a startup in the early stage stages, what would
Okay, great question. I'll just repeat it so everybody has heard it. You know, when developing a startup, what parts of the AIM and ACT system are the most important? And I'm glad you brought that up because I did mention early on that this AIM and ACT system isn't something you should just think about at the end when you're ready to sell. It's really something you should think about. So, you know, really every stage or most of the stages in the first part in AIM, first of all, you certainly want to assess what your goals are, what your partner's goals, if you have a partner, what your family goals, and realistically what it is. One of the things that's very, very important is to think about what your potential buyers are. So the M, market, what your potential buyers are. If you're smart enough to know what your potential buyers are and you can identify a few of them and go to them, you can actually get someone's attention and time and say, what would you need to see from a company like this before it was interesting enough for you to acquire it? And now you've got a roadmap because we usually guess. Most people start a business, hey, it's going to be great, we're going to make all this money. But then they find out there is no buyers. And one of the interesting facts that you might be surprised to hear about is that 60 to 70% of small businesses, now it's very weighted on the very small businesses, 60 to 70% of small businesses that are put on the market for sale aren't sold at all. You know, the buyers, the sellers think they know enough or they figure they'll figure it out as they go along, but they don't get one offer. And that's really shocking because another interesting fact is that about 70 to 80% of most business owners' net worth is in their company. Anybody surprised by that? 70 to 80% of their net worth. They may own a house, they may have some stocks and bonds, but 70 to 80% of their net worth is in their company. So it's really scary, right? Like if you can't sell it. So when you're starting the business or in the middle of the business, you want to do those assessment goals, have realistic goals and so forth. You want to think about valuation too. And it's something that we preach a lot to our clients. Because everybody's tracking revenue and profit, right? And you guys just sort of are taught in school that it's a multiple of revenue or it's a multiple of earning. That's what the company's worth. Because we talk about it all the time, especially with public companies. That's a pretty good indicator for what a company's worth. But in a small business, it isn't always that. It's really about valuation. Valuation is what you sell. But if you're tracking revenue and earnings, you're not tracking value. So you want to track value too. And there's valuation models that you can use online. You can do DCF. But you want to look at what that value is. I had a client, a company that I used to work for, call me up and they wanted us to do a valuation. And so quickly, Cole did a valuation for them. And I just sort of passed on the financials. They didn't look at it. He said, you know what the valuation is? They had record sales, $5 million in sales last year, record profits. And I was thinking, oh God, finally my investment in this company might have payback. He goes, valuation, what was it? Minus 10 million. I was like, what? You know, you must have done it. No, they had 10 million of debt and no hope of paying it back and giant interest payments. And when I sent it to the guy, he was quiet on the phone. He's just like, that's what we're worth. But even with that situation, there's a chance to improve it. Get all your debt holders to convert to preferred equity. Now you've got equity. You've got a chance of raising maybe more equity. You don't have this huge interest burden and so forth. So to answer your question, I know I give long answers. I'm sorry for that. But almost every one of those steps. Clearly, you're not going to close, transition, but you can start thinking about your transition plan too. Does that answer it? How back here? Right. So let me just make sure I understand it. In the AIM and ACT model, how often am I dealing with venture capitalists? Right. 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 You know, it's sort of a black and white thing. If it's a company that is a traditional industrial, say they make a machine, and they've been at it for a long time, and they aren't expecting sort of that hockey stick growth, then venture capitalists aren't going to touch it. Even the angel investors these days, there's a lot of angel groups around Florida, and they act like venture capitalists. They're guys that have money, and they've sort of come together, but they've started to apply a lot of the principles that venture capitalists do in terms of valuation and so forth. But like a Safewire, as you can see, they weren't growing miraculously quickly, 2.2, 3.2 million, but they only, I said I fired the whole sales and marketing team, and I was sort of being, brash about it. It was 3 people. Now, the company they sold to had a 1,000-person sales force. And, so they were doing 20 or 30 surgeries a week, and this company does 200 or 300 surgeries a week. So in that case, venture capital, you got to make the story, and you've got to show them the growth. They don't want to see losses. They don't want to see, running out of cash, because it's really important. The most important thing is make sure you never run out of cash, right? So, but if you can do that, you can find VC that'll do it. And there's a whole thing I could talk for an hour about how to find the right VC, how to match. There's a lot of small startups. Are you thinking about a startup at all yourself, or just you were thinking in general? Right. So it's really hard as a startup, but a company like SafeWire that has products, they had doctors that used it, they had hospitals that paid for it. We sort of proved with 2.2 million, even with 1 million in losses, that people would pay for it. And then when we got to 3.2, we proved that you could make money and they would pay our full price. We didn't have to discount and such. So, but does that make sense? Like the high growth versus low growth is usually the best litmus test on whether or not you're going to get VC investment. Let me go over here. So that product, I mean, I don't want to get too much. He asked, how should I, and I'm glad you asked the question, how did I achieve the sales growth in SafeWire if we only had a 3-person sales force? The short answer is that, you only have to convince a surgeon once to use the product. Once you've convinced them that it's safer for their patient and quicker, and spine surgeries are incredibly well timed. I mean, you can tell me a spine surgery, I'll say it takes 30 minutes. If I could go into that doctor now and say, you're going to save 15 minutes on that surgery, he wouldn't believe it, but that's what their instruments did. So once doctors started using it, all we had to do was find new doctors every month to keep using it. Those guys kept buying for their surgeries because it became a staple, a standard for them. They saw the superiority of the instruments, and then you just keep finding additional ones. So the growth and what we did after the sales team was gone is why it just, all the people we had talked to, all the people who had trialed it, they told friends that we'd show up and do more trials, and it started to grow exponentially. I mean, if we would have kept the company going, we closed in April of 2016, so it was a really recent example, and you can Google SafeWire and you can find out it was acquired by Stryker. It's a multi-billion-dollar implant company. It wasn't the top implant company. We had an offer from another top implant company, but they were number 3, and they were looking for something to differentiate, but massive sales organization. So does that answer it? Is that what you're looking for? How we grew the bottom line? Well, each one of those sales reps made about $250,000 to $300,000 a year. They're highly paid. And unfortunately, Wyatt, when he set up the contracts with the sales force, there was no contingent payment. It wasn't based on commission. One guy had a base of $250,000, plus maybe he got a bonus. Another guy had a huge salary. So if I fired 3 at about $300,000 cost, plus we paid him insurance, car, they all had big bar bills and travel bills and so forth. It's $1 million right there. I mean, I wasn't a genius. We grew the sales. I was brave enough to say, look, we got to fire him. And I didn't just fire him, by the way. I didn't mean to. I sort of said that for dramatic effect. Look, they had contracts. They had families. We said, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sell the company next year. You guys already own stock. You're going to benefit from that. But the company can't stay in business, and we're not going to get this VC investment unless we, lower our cost. And there's only one option. So you guys go find other jobs, and we'll pay you for 3 months, 6 months, pay out through your contract. And they got paid, but as soon as they were gone, sales kept going up because of this repeat order. And one doctor uses one hospital, he tells his friends, the other guys in this same hospital start using it. And of course, with a lower cost, lower overheads, we're able to increase the profit. So, but by the way, I use that exact same strategy in business school in one of these business game simulations. Last quarter, have any of you guys played any business simulations? They do it in the MBA program, right? Last 2 quarters, I started cutting everything, and I won that. And I'll never forget. I'm like, God, that was so easy. Just fire everything, and I make a profit. Well, so I have sort of applied that a little bit, but it was a necessity. It really was not a fun or so. I think.
The question for you, in your experience particularly, how did you find it when you were first starting up? I mean, these companies you're dealing with
Right.
aren't enormous companies that are
Right.
used to doing deals. How did you sort of establish that level of trust when you're first starting out?
Right.
And build up from it?
So when I started my M&A firm, look, I'm still starting, right? For the last 20 years, I've owned companies and run companies, and I've done a lot of consulting. You might wonder how I have 15 companies under my belt and exits and so forth. I've been a part-time CFO for companies. I've done this sort of on the side while I was running my own company. People have hired me to do that. But I've just started the M&A firm literally last summer. I don't know if any of you guys know Jake Gustafson, employee number 1. Guy came in on a summer intern, was taking some classes. Great guy, did a great job. I hired one marketing woman who's still with me today, worked full time. We started to put together systems. But I got a customer right away, and it was word of mouth, my reputation. I just went out, changed my LinkedIn, started telling a few people. And in fact, I'm not marketing right now at all. So don't tell your friends and family members that, you should talk to this guy. We're still setting up the system because I want to really develop this website. It's called Exit Experts, and create the webinar and the course to teach people. I have this sort of crazy dream that I'm going to help some manufacturer in the Midwest sell his business. I'm going to help a little old lady in India sell her little storefront. I'm going to try to help a lot of people learn and avoid the mistakes, avoid leaving money on the table, some of these disappointments that I've had through the system. So I'm educating. Once I have that fully up and running, then we're going to go out. We've got marketing campaigns. And, but still clients, the customer from Mexico came in. I thought, well, let's do it. Cole's got nothing else to do on a Friday night. Let's get it done. Right. Does that answer your question? Yeah. I think you had a question for me.
In your experience, how much more difficult is it to sell a business that has multiple partners rather than solo? Is there often a conflict of interest there?
Yeah, there is. There is. Glad that you brought that up. He asked, is there often a conflict when you have multiple partners? So one thing I like to tell people is that all partnerships fail. Now, some fail in the first year. Alan and I essentially failed in the year 12, but they all eventually fail, and it's for exactly what you alluded to. Everybody has different situations, family situations, financial situations, so it's a little scary, unless the partners are really well aligned. Now, there is sort of a moderator for that. The moderator is, if the company's wildly profitable, then they all tend to get along better. It's when there's tough times that it becomes much more difficult. But still, and people's wives get involved, and their spouses get involved, and their kids are sometimes working in the business, and even though they're not a partner, they act like a partner, so it can become very, very complicated. And that's why I would say this first stage of doing assess, sitting down and make sure they get all the people involved that are sort of stakeholders and trying to determine the goals and get agreement on that. Don't even go to step 2 until you can get that. It's really important. And as you can imagine, family businesses are some of the most challenging. I tend to try to stay away from those. Okay. Yes?
Just kind of a more of a background question. Starting with that engineering degree,
Right.
How did you kind of make that jump, and why did you make that jump to more the business?
Okay.
world?
I was going to hold that to the end, but I'll answer that, and I want to do a quick wrap-up, and then we'll come back to some more questions. I really enjoy answering the questions. So my undergraduate degree was electrical engineering, and I was big into computers and programming and things like that, but I knew I never wanted to do design work. I did my internship for 4 summers in a row at GM, at Pontiac Motor Division, in quality and manufacturing and things like that. And I enjoyed it, but I knew I wanted to go into sales. For some reason, I always thought, I can sell, that'll be fun. But I went into semiconductor sales, computer chips. And I worked for Texas Instruments, so another big company. And then after a year and a half, 2 years of that, I thought, no, there's got to be something better. And I took the GMAT, and I got a really good score. And I thought, God, this thing's going to expire. I got to do something with it. And I had no thought I would get into business school. When I got there, I thought, maybe I'll do something else. Maybe I'll go into banking. That seems popular. And I worked on Wall Street. And one summer sort of told me, banking wasn't the right thing for me. So I was always interested in technology. All the companies I've owned, all the companies I've invested in are technology, either electronics, machinery. The last company that I ran for the last 7 years was a biotech company. And I didn't know anything about biotech, but now I'm sort of like a mini expert at biotech. We had 23 scientists, and we had 3 labs, and we've developed this great drug for treating osteoarthritis. We have knee pain, joint pain, back pain, and we raised $25 million in capital. The thing's still working its way through clinical trials. Hope and pray that everything goes well. But it was just a matter of taking that technical degree and then deciding if I was going to reinvent myself. And to some degree, having an M&A firm is a reinvention of myself too. So you see, I've done it a couple of times. One of the things I like to tell people is you can be an expert at any age, as long as you define your market narrowly enough. Like somebody yesterday said to me, I heard you're the only M&A firm in Gainesville. And I said, that's not surprising, right? Like how much need is there for an M&A firm in Gainesville? I mean, I'm here because my girlfriend's an MBA student, I'm a doctoral student, and we started it here, right? So, but if you define your market narrow enough, I'm really focused on medical device companies and packaging machine companies, like Doyen was. And those will be my initial markets, although Exit Experts hopes to serve the world, with educational information and guidance. Yeah.
Just follow up on that. Through that process, did you have a mentor along that way, or was there anyone that really motivated you?
Yes, I think that's helpful. They're harder and harder to get these days. I'd like to have a mentor now. I actually do have a mentor. He's about 85, 90 years old. He was the broker that actually helped me sell Doyen. He didn't do anything wrong, and I've admired him. He had a large firm, but yeah, all the way along, my mentor at Doyen was Alan. He was my former boss, and he was my mentor. It's very difficult to do it, right, because people are so pressed for time. Nobody has any time. But if you can find a way to give somebody that you identify, give them something, help them with something, you've got a better chance. I'm hoping to have Dr. Perina as my mentor. He's actually agreed to be on my dissertation committee, so I've got to have a professor or two on my dissertation. So we've had one meeting, and I'm hoping he can mentor me a little bit because he's been doing M&A for a long time on the advisory side. I've been doing it on the I own a company or I want to buy a company side. And so we were sharing notes, and I'm learning from him. So, but he's a really busy guy, right? Have some of you guys had Perina? Right, he's fantastic, fantastic professor, right? Answer your question? Okay, good. Anybody else? Good, one more.
I guess a lot of us are going to go look for investment banks where it's going to take multiple teams, multiple departments
Right.
to finish a deal.
Yeah.
I guess I don't quite understand how to do that.
Exactly, because again, what I said, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, we're doing micro deals. When you go to a real M&A firm, I mean, I know that I've been there, right? It's $1 billion deal, $100 million. Even if you went to a regional M&A firm here, okay, nobody's really going to do much more than or much less than a $50 million or $100 million deal. And then you're going to have teams of lawyers, accountants, M&A professionals, analysts, and so forth. I'm really looking at that low end of the market. My friends always say, you're the biggest fish in the littlest sea that we can imagine, right? And I don't mind, because whereas those guys might get fees of 3%, I could get 10% on some deals. And I also decide when I work and when I go on vacation. I'm going to Europe for the summer, and so I have a lot more flexibility. So the only reason I say that, not to brag at all, and I'm sorry if that sounded that way, is that you guys get to decide. Go to the big banks first. I did. I went to work for the biggest junk bond. Anybody ever heard of Drexel Burnham? Right. I was in M&A for financial institutions. You can't imagine more complicated balance sheets. And I worked literally from 9 in the morning to 11 every night of the week, usually once a week, all night, go home for 2 or 3 hours of sleep, come back. Saturday we were in there at 11 till about 6. And often we were in there on Sunday. It was intense, and I learned a lot, and it was great. And I would say all of you should try to, if you're really interested in M&A, get that experience, because when you come out of there, you'll know balance sheets, income statements, pitch books, financial analysis. You'll be creating models, financial models. Like we create financial models, but they're very simple. But get that experience. But also realize there's another world. In fact, there's much more small businesses than there are big businesses, right? There's lots of micro businesses, 5 million, 10 million, that make profits, that are valuable. In fact, I saw a statistic yesterday that there's $10 trillion worth of businesses, small business value, that needs to transition to new owners in the next 10 to 15 years because of what's going on with the baby boomers. So there's all these small businesses that are either going to dry up, they're going to get transferred to a family member who might not even be that interested. And again, I told you that in 5 years, 50% of businesses that transfer fail, or they're going to be sold successfully. Somebody's going to do a roll-up, something like that. So there's real opportunity for you to work in the small segment, okay? And I'm not going to just have 3 people. The 3 people, they're helping me with, documents, marketing. We're creating a lot of forums and systems, and we're trialing it out on the handful of clients that we have. Eventually, I'll add a staff. I'll hire people. I'll be looking for MSF students. I'm going to hire interns, as I mentioned in the little email that went around. I'm looking for people full-time for this summer because we're going to do some launching. And then even though I'm moving to Philadelphia in the fall, I'm going to be looking for more MSF people too, because and other finance people. If you're not an MSF, doesn't matter. I'm looking for people from this university because I've had such high quality work and such high, loyalty and good work ethic from people here. I'm really impressed. You guys are lucky. Yes.
When you're buying and selling to smaller companies, I feel like a much larger percent of their value compared to larger companies is probably derived from the qualitative factors.
Yeah,
Could that be like difficult to explain?
it's really a good observation. They certainly earnings are important and growth, right? Like how do you guys have looked at a lot of public companies, right? We look at their earnings, the growth of earnings, and the expectation of growth of earnings, and that's how we derive the stock price. In small companies, they want to see earnings. I mean, selling a company with no earnings, that's a tough sale. Selling a company with no growth, that's a tough sale, except if a lot of small companies have no salespeople, and if the company over here sells their kind of products and they have 20 salespeople, then you can sell that. But some of the qualitative things are very important because many small businesses, the 1 or 2 or 3 key people make the business. And so that's where it comes back to these contingent things like earnouts, contracts, employment agreements. It's really important in this transition phase to keep those people because in businesses under 20 or even under 50 million, the owner, if he's been there any amount of time, if he's the founder, he's instrumental. So that would be a qualitative thing. And then the other qualitative thing would be sort of the intellectual property. Now these companies, most companies are not, unless they're like a Safewire, they're not intellectual property darlings. They're not patented minds that they've created this wall around this technology. We did that at Safewire. But most companies, their IP is just, they built 5 of these things and they've been building them and improving them for 10 years. And that's qualitative too, but it shows up in the revenue. It shows up in the earnings. You know, the fact that you built something that's a great mousetrap and nobody buys it means it's not value. So it's revenue, it's earnings, and then a handful of qualitative things. But now that first impression point that I gave you all when somebody walks into a factory, if it looks messy, if the offices, the files, the financials, all that stuff is a mess, think about that. It's cognitive. It's in our brain. It's not just like we make a snap judgment. When we have a first impression, it is stuck in our brain, in the reptilian part of our brain, until we can find enough evidence that changes it. So those first impressions are really, really important, and that might be a little bit of what you're talking about, these subjective. Anything else? Let me just do a very quick update. How are we doing on time? Well over? Talk too much. Okay. So look at the final point I want to leave you with. Of course, the aim and act system could be modified. You could use it for other things. When I told you about the company, if you remember, we had 489 companies we contacted. We were trying to sell a company. 20 people signed the non-disclosure agreement. 10 people visited. 5 made an offer, and I said we started to get a bidding war, and I was telling you how this is a great thing. How many, do you think we closed that deal? 5 offers? Should really close it. I was sure we were going to close it, but we didn't close it because for the owners, it wasn't about the dollars, it wasn't about the contract, it wasn't even about their transition. This business was about the sacrifices they had made. Small businesses are different. There's emotion. You know, you missed your kid's baseball game. You didn't go on vacation. Or you went on vacation, but you were still thinking about your business. You went to a family event. Has anybody ever seen this, you know, with a family member? They're at the event, but they're thinking about work, or they got to leave early, right? It's a years and years of sacrifices. So when people sell their business, it's not just about maximizing dollars. Can I have the next point? It's about leaving a legacy. You know, they're in these communities, really. These are small businesses. They employ, when I employ at Doyen with 100 people, I would sit and show a chart at the beginning of the year to our managers of how many backpacks we're going to be paying for when school starts, how many car payments. Just think about it, 100 people, but if they're the breadwinner, that could be 200 car payments. How many rent payments? How many new pairs of new shoes? Like, it has a real impact. There's real people behind it, and it has an impact on the community. And typically these owners stay in the community and they want that legacy to go on. With Doyen, we looked it up today online. I think there's like 3 or 4 employees. The website's gone. It's owned, parts of it are owned by another company. It's in German. You know, all those employees gone. They had to go find other jobs. And it's not a great legacy. I don't really talk about it that much. I brag about Safewire all the time. Oh yeah, Safewire, we sold it to Stryker, right? And if you do one good deal, people talk about it for years. Oh yeah, we did that deal. It was a great deal. You know, but I don't talk about Doyen that much, just with you guys, because you know I wasn't able to leave a legacy there really. And you know, it's also about people transitioning, how they can move to that next chapter of their life, because that's really important. You know, nobody golfs forever. Nobody goes on a boat forever. Nobody just sits at home. and does binge surfing on the TV or on Netflix, binge Netflix watching. They want to go on to the next chapter of life. And the next chapter of your life could be like Wyatt, could be a new business, another startup, do it bigger, do it better than last time. Or it could be charity work. You're going to work as a businessman in charity or volunteer work. But there's definitely going to be a next chapter. So there's real importance when you work with business owners, or if you are business owners, to think about these things. And that's why I think this Aim and Act system will help you, guide you a little bit as you start to get out there in the world and work with business owners and become business owners yourself. Okay? So, one last slide here. As I mentioned earlier, this is a new presentation for me. And I'm going to try to be giving it to business owners across the country starting in the next few weeks. So I'd love to have your feedback. And the more critical feedback, the more constructive critical feedback that you can give me, the better. If you can take a picture, I don't know if it's going to work with that line in it, but we'll also email you. And if you send in a survey, we're going to raffle off a $25 Starbucks or Chipotle, your choice, gift card to one lucky member. So if we've got your email address here, we'll email this, or if you want to snap the snappy guy there, then do it. Okay? Did we get everybody's email address? Okay. Any other questions? Sure. Okay, great. We'll get it back to you here. Thanks. I appreciate it. Like I said, I've got thick skin. You can be as critical. The slides stunk. You talk too long. You don't have to say that I talk too quickly, because I already know I probably did that. But I really, really am grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you all. I hope I gave you some ideas about getting rid of that couch. No, about using the Aim and Act system, and about how you might plot the next steps in your career. And because we've done this now, you guys can all email me anytime that you want to if you have questions. My office is in Gainesville, downtown Gainesville, right above Amelia's. And you'll see me at Boca Fiesta, probably a little bit more than I should be. I think I got great tacos. But I'd be glad to answer questions. Email's always the best for me, but certainly I'll entertain phone calls and meetings and such if people are interested in this kind of a career path or have other questions about M&A. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.